Shalom Aleichem. I don't usually start like this, but this was going to be in the merit of a dear friend of so many, Elyakeem Kinstlinger, who just passed away today. Very tragic. A young man who's loved by all. Brilliant mind, very creative, always looking to improve this world in education in many ways. You knew him, you loved him. He was on the west side for many years. That's where we got to know him. Frequented our Shabbat dinners. And now recently, last few years, he was in Israel and he had some medical complications and he just passed today. So God bless his soul. It's already blessed, but just putting this Dvar Torah in his merit and Tehei Nishmas Tzur B'Tzur HaChaim. Parshas Tetzaveh talks about many items of the Kohen, regarding to the Kohen. In this talk, the Rebbe brings an impactful point and brings a horrifying story that I wish I had never heard. He references it in his talk. It starts off kind of peacefully, and there's a lot of technical stuff way beyond the scope of this talk. But he talks about, in the Torah, when it talks about the Me'il, the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, all the Kohanim, all the priests. But the Me'il was this robe, this tunic, this long garment that went from the neck down to the bottom. There was a lot about that. There were bells and whistles and pomegranates on the tip, on the bottom, to make noise, to ring. But here the Torah describes that the top, the collar, had to be double hemmed. It had to be enforced and reinforced. And the Torah says, so that it should not tear. Okay, makes sense. Rashi tells us that the reason why the Torah is telling us over here that it needs to be hemmed so that it should not tear is not to tell us that you're not allowed to rip the holy clothing, the fabulous clothing of the Kohen, of the high priest, because that we already know. We already know that from before, where the Torah commands us to honor the clothing, to respect them. Of course, you'd never tear it. Rashi says that the Torah is adding a strength of a biblical prohibition to this item, to not tearing the garment of the Kohen, and especially this one, but all of them too. So we have that, and then Rashi, the biblical commentator, teaches, and he says that this is similar to two other prohibitions where the Torah already tells us things that we already know, but the Torah is adding the level of a biblical prohibition to it. One of them is that in the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wear, the high priest wore, there was an apron. Inside the apron there was the breastplate, the Choshen Mishpat. It had these stones that had all the names of the tribes to remember the Jewish people before God. It used to light up and illuminate magically and inspire the Kohen with messages, answers from God. But specifically, the prohibition is you cannot remove the breastplate from the apron. You can't remove the choshen from the ephod. And then Rashi, the commentator, brings one more item that is similar, and he says that it's similar to the prohibition to remove the poles of the ark, the carrying poles with which they carried the ark from its rings that were attached to the ark. They had to stay inside the ark always. Now this is somewhat, the first two kind of make sense. Logically, don't tear the clothing of the Kohen. Makes sense. Don't remove the names of the Jews from the Kohen's garments. That makes sense. But to not remove the poles of the Aron Kodesh, of the Ark, from the rings that carry it doesn't really make sense that much. It's not so obvious because the ark, the Aron, was in the Kodesh HaKodashim. It was just stationed there and it wasn't moving until they had to actually get up and move. So, whatever. Bottom line is, it's a prohibition, and Rashi's comparing. Don't tear the clothing of the Kohen to not removing the staves of the ark. Why can't we remove those poles? So there's a great man wrote a book called The Chinuch. The Rebbe quotes it, and the Chinuch says the reason why you can't remove the poles from the ark is because the Jewish people had to be ready at a moment's notice, without any delay, for when God would say it's time to travel, they would be able to pick up the ark right away and start traveling. And no one would have to look for those poles or affix them or tighten them. They always had to be ready for travel. That's what he says. The Rebbe takes us for a ride and says this is a lesson for us. Because every Jew is a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol. And every Jew is actually an ark. Every Jew has the Torah within him. And now a Jew might say, I am this holy ark. I have the 2 tablets within myself. I'm a busy guy. And I'm studying Torah. I'm doing something good. I'm involved in something important. And if somebody else needs help, let somebody else deal with it. I'm busy. I don't have the time to deal with someone else's issues. I don't have the time to teach someone else, to help someone else. Says the Torah, says the Rebbe, that the Torah gave us a prohibition to remove those poles so that we shouldn't even delay for a moment, delay someone else's helping. So the last few days after I learned this like 3 or 4 days ago, at least 5 times it happened to me where somebody asked for help and I was thinking, okay, I could push it off. I'm in the middle of something. I could delay it for a minute, an hour, or a day. But because I learned this, I was scared, as you'll hear from the story in a moment. And I immediately dealt with the task at hand and tried to help that person. And you can too. Says the Rebbe, removing the sticks from the ark. Rashi is comparing removing the sticks from the ark, which means delaying to help another. Like the ark had to be moved from one place to another, where God says, I need the Torah somewhere else. I need it moved, as if parallel to someone needs your help elsewhere. But if you don't do that, it's similar to tearing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. That's what the Rebbe is telling us, is what Rashi is telling us. That if we don't help somebody right away, it's like we're ripping, physically tearing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. The story that the Rebbe brought. The Rebbe referenced the story. Everyone knows. Most people have heard of Reb Nachum Ish Gamzu. Reb Nachum Ish Gamzu is famous for a few stories in the Talmud where things happened to him and they were seemingly negative, but they end up turning positive. But in his mind, even while they were happening, seemingly negative, he said, Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. So he was named Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu. He's the man who said, also this, Gam zu l'tova. Also this is for the good. Everything's for the good. Everything God does. But here is a lesser known story about Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu in the Gemara of Taanis. I think it's page 21. Rabbi Nachum was amputated. Both his legs, both his arms and feet were all amputated. His body was full of boils. He was laying on a bed, and the house in which he was laying was crumbling. It was falling apart. His students wanted to save him. So they came and they started removing, they came to his bed. Oh, I forgot to say, his bed, the Talmud says, had the four legs of his bed were in 4 pails of water to prevent the bugs from climbing up the beds to bite him, because he didn't have hands or feet to protect himself. But his students came to help him, to take him out of this dilapidated house that's falling apart, that's crumbling. They were going to take him first. And he said to them, take out everything from the house first. Take out all my vessels, all my belongings, and then take me. Because while I'm here, as long as I'm here, the house will not fall. They listened, they'd emptied the house, and then they came back for him. The moment he left the house, it completely imploded, it crumbled, and it fell apart. The students asked him, they said, Reb Nachum, you're such a tzaddik, you're such a righteous man. We know that anyways from your deeds, but we know that even more now from this idea that the house didn't crumble until you left it. Why is it that you are punished so, without hands, feet, and boils all over your body? Horrible story. Nicht auf keinem dick gedacht. As they say, no one should have this story. But Reb Nachum answered, he said, I brought it upon myself. He said, I made it happen. How so? He said, once I was traveling with 3 donkeys full of delicacies. One had luxurious foods, delicious foods. Another one was full of drinks. And another one was, I forgot, like perfume or something like that. The 3 donkeys full of goods on his way to his father-in-law's house. And a poor man stopped at the side of the road and said, please, parneseni, give me something to eat. Reb Nachum said, I said to that man, wait a little bit until I unload the donkey. I guess it means till he gets to the house to unload. I'm not really sure because it doesn't say it there. But wait a little bit, whatever it was, hamten, rega, wait a little bit until I unload the donkeys and then I will feed you. Maybe it even meant unload it right then and there. Whatever it was. Wait. He didn't respond immediately. Rav Nachum turned around and saw that the man had passed away. Rav Nachum fell onto the man, onto this poor man, and said, I forgot, he was blind too. Said, may the eyes who didn't see you be blinded. May the hands who didn't serve you be cut off, be amputated. May the feet who didn't run to help you be cut off, and may the body who didn't feel your pain be filled with pain, with boils. And that's what happened. Reb Nachum brought it upon himself. And the Rebbe tells us that the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, brings this story for a reason. It tells us this not for naught, to remind us that it's really, really essential that whenever we have an opportunity to help another, we don't delay. We don't delay that opportunity, we help them right away. That's the story for today. I think it's a horrible story, but a powerful lesson. Whatever the case is, our friend Elyakeem, said Hashem should have an Aliyah. He was always helping people. Everyone knows him, knows that. He was helping people, and I'm sure he did it as soon and as swift as he could. And we have a lot to learn from him. May his memory, his Hashem, be blessed.